everyone, Sarah here. Rewind Justice brings you revenge stories that will blow your mind. If you're ready, hit subscribe and let's go.
I learned early that being the younger sister meant being the footnote in someone else's story. David was the genius. The prodigy. The boy who coded his first website at 9, built his first app at 13, got accepted to Stanford at 16. I was the quiet one. The background character. The girl who existed to make David look even more exceptional by comparison. David's presenting at the Youth Tech Conference. Mom announced at dinner when I was 14 and David was 17. 300 attendees. VCs will be there. I'd won a national mathematics competition that same week. Perfect score. Only student in my state to do it. Nobody mentioned it. That's amazing, David, I said because I meant it. My brother was brilliant. He deserved recognition. What about you, Sophie? David asked, actually looking at me across the table. Didn't you have some math thing? Before I could answer, Dad interrupted. Sophie's always been good at homework. But David's creating real-world applications. That's the difference between academic and entrepreneurial thinking. I was 14. I hadn't even chosen a career path yet. That became the pattern. David achieved, parents celebrated, I existed in the margins. When David got into Stanford, they threw a graduation party with 50 guests and a custom cake. When I got into MIT 2 years later with a full ride, Mom said, "That's wonderful, honey. Can you help me address these envelopes for David's startup launch party?" I addressed the envelopes. I always did what they asked. During college, the divide crystallized into something harder. David dropped out of Stanford after freshman year. Not because he failed, but because his social media analytics startup got seed funding. $1.2 million from a Silicon Valley VC. He was 19. He was unstoppable. He was everything our parents had always known he would be. I stayed at MIT. Finished my computer science degree. Built 3 different AI-powered financial modeling tools that my professors called extraordinary. Published 2 papers in academic journals. Nobody in my family read them. My senior year, I sold my first algorithm to a hedge fund for $2.7 million. Machine learning model that predicted market movements with 73% accuracy. The fund's managing partner told me, "This is the most sophisticated analysis tool we've seen from someone your age." I told my family I'd done some consulting work. They assumed I'd made maybe $10,000. I never corrected them. David's startup Socialmetric grew fast. By his second year, he had 40 employees, major clients, expansion plans. He was the youngest CEO featured in TechCrunch's 30 Under 30. Mom framed the article. Dad kept copies in his car to show colleagues. I had graduated MIT by then. I was 22, working as a quantitative analyst at a fintech firm while building my own algorithmic trading platform on the side. My net worth was $8.4 million. Nobody in my family knew. The call came from David's CFO, Jennifer Martinez. We'd met once at a family Christmas, where she'd been the only person who asked about my work. "Sophie? It's Jennifer from Socialmetric. Do you have a moment?" "Of course. We're raising our Series B, $8 million round to scale operations and expand to international markets. Your brother mentioned you work in finance. Any chance you'd be interested in investing?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. David had never asked me himself. Never called to discuss his company, his challenges, his vision. Jennifer was reaching out because she was being thorough, not because David wanted his little sister involved. But he was my brother. And some pathetic part of me still wanted to be useful to this family. "How much are you looking for?" I asked. "We need $8 million total. We have $1.7 million committed from existing investors. Looking for the rest." "I'll invest $6.3 million, I said. "But I have conditions." "Name them." 1. My investment is completely anonymous. David never knows. Your board never knows unless legally required. Silent means absolutely silent. There was a pause. That's unusual. 2. If David ever asks you directly whether I'm an investor, you tell him the truth. But unless he asks directly, you say nothing. Why the secrecy? 3. Standard Series B terms. This is business, not charity. I want appropriate equity, board observer rights, and standard liquidation preferences. You'll have 41% equity at that valuation. And Sophie, that's a massive investment. Are you sure? Wire instructions are in the email I'm sending now. I'll need standard documentation within 48 hours. I hung up before she could ask more questions. Why did I do it? God, I've analyzed that decision 1,000 times. Was it love? Hope? The scapegoat child still trying to earn her place at the table? Probably all three. But I structured it as a real investment. Real equity. Real rights. Because even at 22 I knew this family took without acknowledging and I needed legal protection. The wire went through the next day. $6.3 million from my investment account to Social Metric's corporate account. David never knew. Social Metric exploded. My $6.3 million gave them the runway to expand to Europe, hire top talent, acquire 2 competitors. Within 18 months, they tripled revenue. David became a tech celebrity. Speaking engagements. Podcast interviews. Advisory boards. At every family dinner I heard about his brilliance. Series C closed at a $95 million valuation, David announced at Easter. We're now the fastest-growing social analytics platform in the market. That's my boy, Dad beamed. Built from nothing. Pure vision and execution. Pure vision and my $6.3 million, I thought. But I smiled. That's incredible, David. What about you, Sophie? Mom asked without real interest. Still doing the analyst thing? Yes, still in finance. Well, maybe David can introduce you to some investors, Dad suggested. Help you understand how real wealth gets built. I was managing a $47 million portfolio at that point. My personal net worth was $34 million. I nodded. That would be great, Dad. Every quarterly board meeting, Jennifer sent me observer reports. I never attended. My agreement allowed observation rights, but I kept my distance. I just read the financials, the growth metrics, the expansion plans. My $6.3 million had grown to an equity position worth $38.7 million. David had no idea his little sister owned 41% of his company. The more successful David became, the more condescending he got. At his 25th birthday party, Sophie, you're what, 24? Still haven't figured out the startup world. At Mom's 60th, Sophie's more of a traditional career person. Some people need stability. Not everyone has the risk tolerance for entrepreneurship. At Thanksgiving 2 years ago, my company's valuation puts my net worth at $52 million. Sophie, what's your savings account looking like? Comfortable. I had $71 million across various investments. I told him, I'm doing fine. Each dismissal hurt less. I was building something they couldn't see, didn't value, would never understand. My algorithmic trading platform. My venture portfolio. My real estate investments. I started having coffee with Jennifer every few months. She knew my secret. She respected it. Your brother's a visionary, Jennifer told me one morning. But Sophie, between us, your capital saved this company. That Series B timing was perfect. The market shifted 3 months later. We never would have gotten that valuation. Your $6.3 million let us move fast enough to capture market share before competitors caught up. He doesn't need to know. Why not? You're his sister. You made his success possible. Because he didn't ask for my help. He didn't want it. He wanted to build something himself. I just made sure he could. Jennifer shook her head. You're kinder than I'd be. Or more pathetic. No, Jennifer said firmly. More strategic. You're building your own empire while staying invisible. I see what you're doing. It's brilliant. I wasn't sure it was brilliant. But it was survival. This year's Thanksgiving was at my parents' house. 30 people. Family, David's employees, his investors, his girlfriend who modeled part-time and called herself an influencer. David arrived in his new Porsche. Custom suit. Confidence like armor. I came in my Honda Civic. I dressed simply. I stood near the kitchen. Mom found me setting out appetizers. Sophie, honey, don't hide in here. There are important people in the living room. Maybe you can network, make some professional connections. I'm fine, Mom. Just try to be impressive, okay? David's investors are here. Don't embarrass him. I owned 41% of David's company. But I nodded. I'll try. The afternoon progressed. David held court in the living room, talking about Series C plans, international expansion, potential IPO timeline. I stayed quiet. Watched. Listened. Then came dinner. 30 people around 3 tables pushed together. David at the head naturally. Parents flanking him. I was near the end between Aunt Carol and one of David's junior developers. Dad stood to give the blessing. But first, a toast. I'm thankful for many things this year, Dad began. But especially for my son David, who's shown us all what determination and brilliance can achieve. From a kid coding in his bedroom to a CEO building a $95 million company. That's the American dream, folks. That's what vision looks like. Everyone applauded. David smiled, nodded, soaked it in. And I'm thankful, Dad continued, that David built this himself. No handouts. No help. Just pure talent and work ethic. No handouts except my $6.3 million. But I stayed quiet. Mom stood next. I want to add something. David, we're so proud. You've never asked us for anything. Never needed help. You just went out and conquered the world. David's girlfriend squeezed his hand. His employees beamed. His investors nodded approvingly. Then Mom turned to me. Sophie, I wish you'd learn from your brother. About ambition. About building something meaningful instead of just collecting a paycheck. The table got quiet. Not uncomfortable. More like agreeable silence. Yeah, Sophie, learn from your successful brother. Actually, David added, speaking of which, Sophie, when are you going to help me with social metric? I could use someone with your analytical background. Maybe part-time? I can't pay market rate, but it would be good experience for you. He was offering me an entry-level position at the company I owned 41% of. That's a great opportunity, Sophie, Dad said. You should seriously consider it. I smiled politely. That's very generous, David. Think about it, he said. Family supports family, right? Then Mom leaned forward. Her voice had an edge. Speaking of which, Sophie, when will you actually help your brother? He's building something real. The least you could do is support him. Contribute somehow. Mom's right, Dad added. Family supports family. Stop being so self-centered. David could use your help. Every eye on me. Waiting for me to feel properly shamed. I nodded quietly. You're absolutely right. I should do better. Good, Mom said, satisfied. It's about time you stepped up. I pulled out my phone. Excused myself to the bathroom. In the hallway I opened my email. Typed a message to my investment firm. Pull the entire $6.3 million Series B funding from Social Metric. Exercise liquidation preference under Section 8.4. Timeline, immediate. Then a second email to my attorney. Invoke equity dissolution rights. Full buyout per partnership agreement. Notify board immediately. I hit send on both. Walked back to the table. Took my seat. Finished my mashed potatoes. David was talking about Q4 projections. His CFO Jennifer's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Went completely pale. Looked at me across the table. I raised my water glass slightly. Smiled. Jennifer excused herself. Stepped into the kitchen. I heard her making a phone call, voice urgent but quiet. 2 minutes later she came back. Whispered something to David. I watched his face change. Confusion. Then something close to panic. I need to take this call, David said, standing abruptly. Sorry everyone. Work emergency. He disappeared into Dad's office. Jennifer followed. The dinner continued. People eating, laughing, oblivious. I knew what was happening in that office. David was reading the partnership agreement for the first time. Seeing my name listed as the Series B lead investor. Understanding that 41% of his company belonged to his little sister. The sister he just offered an entry-level position to. 10 minutes later David emerged. His face was ashen. Sophie, can we talk? Privately. Of course. We went to the back porch. November cold bit through my sweater. Jennifer just told me something insane, David said. His voice was shaking. She says you're our Series B investor. That you put in $6.3 million 3 years ago. That's correct. How? How do you have $6.3 million? I built an algorithmic trading platform. Sold it to a hedge fund consortium for $18 million when I was 26. I've been investing the returns since. You sold for $18 million? Yes. When? 2 years before your Series B. The math was crushing him. While he'd been celebrating his success, His little sister had been building wealth he couldn't imagine. Why didn't you tell me? You never asked. About my work, my projects, my life. You assumed I was struggling and you were comfortable with that assumption. So you invested in my company to what? Prove a point? I invested because Jennifer called and asked. Because you're my brother. Because I believed in what you were building. And because I had the capital to help. Then why are you pulling it now? His voice cracked. Jennifer says if you exercise your liquidation preference, we'll have to pay you $38.7 million within 90 days. We don't have that kind of liquid capital. We'll have to gut the company. Lay off staff. Cancel expansion. Maybe even fail? I finished. Like you've been assuming I would my entire life? Sophie, please. This is my company. My reputation. My life's work. Built on my $6.3 million. That's what Jennifer's report will show when the board meets. That my Series B investment gave you the runway for everything that came after. I didn't know. Because you didn't ask. Because it was easier to assume your little sister was just a mediocre analyst at a mediocre firm. Because seeing me as successful would have meant sharing the spotlight. David ran his hands through his hair. What do you want? An apology? I'll apologize. In front of everyone. I don't want an apology, David. I want you to understand what you did. At that table in front of 30 people, Mom asked when I would help you. Dad called me self-centered for not supporting you. And you offered me an entry-level job at a company I own 41% of. Jesus Christ. I've been supporting you for 3 years. Silently. Because that's what I thought family meant. But I'm done being invisible. I'm done funding my own dismissal. I walked back inside. David followed. The dinner table was starting dessert. Mom looked up. Everything okay? David has an announcement, I said. He stared at me. Terrified. Tell them, I said quietly. David swallowed hard. There's something you should all know. About the company. About where our funding came from. David, this isn't the time, Jennifer said carefully. No, Sophie's right. You should know. He looked at our parents. 3 years ago we raised our Series B, $8 million round. I told you we got it from a consortium of Silicon Valley investors. We remember, Dad said proudly. That's when things really took off. The lead investor wasn't from Silicon Valley. She invested $6.3 million. She owns 41% of Socialmetric. And she's sitting at this table. Confused silence. Sophie is our largest investor, David said. She has been for 3 years. Mom laughed. That's not possible. Sophie doesn't have that kind of. I have $89 million, I said calmly. Across various investments. My net worth is roughly 3 times David's. The table went completely silent. Dad's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. You have, what? $89 million. I sold my first algorithm for $2.7 million when I was 21. Second platform for $18 million at 26. I've been building a venture portfolio since. David's company is one of 12 I've invested in. Why didn't you tell us? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Because you never asked. Because every time David succeeded you celebrated. Every time I succeeded you didn't notice. So I stopped trying to be noticed. But you let us think. I let you think what you wanted to think. That I was mediocre. That I needed David's help. That I was the self-centered one for not supporting him. I looked at David. When actually I've been supporting him the whole time. Jennifer spoke up. For the record, Sophie's Series B investment was the best thing that happened to Socialmetric. The timing, the terms, the strategic support. It gave us the foundation for everything we've built. And now she's pulling it, David said quietly. Because of what we said tonight. You're what? Dad's face went red. Sophie, you can't do that. You'll destroy his company. I'm exercising my legal rights as an investor. David's company will have 90 days to buy out my position at current valuation. $38.7 million. We don't have that, David said. We'll have to liquidate assets. Cancel expansion. Probably lay off 30% of staff. Then you'll rebuild, I said. With your vision and work ethic. Isn't that what Dad said? That you built this from nothing. The table was frozen. 30 people watching a family implode. Sophie, please, Mom said. Don't do this. We're sorry. We didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. Because it was easier to have one successful child and one failure. It made the story simpler. That's not fair, Dad said. What's not fair is spending 28 years being invisible in my own family. What's not fair is funding my brother's success while being called self-centered for not helping him. What's not fair is watching him offer me an entry-level job at a company I literally own. I stood up. I'm leaving. My attorney will contact Social Metrics Board tomorrow with formal dissolution paperwork. You have 90 days. David caught my arm. Sophie, wait. Please. Can we just talk about this? Away from everyone. We've been talking my whole life, David. You just never listened. The next week was chaos I observed from a safe distance. David called 43 times. Mom called crying. Dad called threatening to cut me out of the family, which was hilarious since I'd already been out. I didn't answer. Jennifer called once. Sophie, the board met. We're trying to arrange emergency funding to buy you out. Can we negotiate extended terms? 5-year payment plan. Standard terms. 90 days. No exceptions. This will hurt the company. Good people will lose their jobs. Then David should have thought about that before offering me a pity position at my own investment. I felt bad about the employees. I did. But I couldn't keep funding a company led by someone who saw me as a charity case. Week 3, the tech blogs picked up the story. Social metric in crisis. Anonymous major investor exits. Speculation ran wild. Mismanagement. Findle. Strategic pivot gone wrong. None of them knew the truth. The investor was the CEO's little sister, and she was done being invisible. Week 6, my parents showed up at my condo. I'd never told them where I lived. They'd hired someone to find me. I let them in. Sophie, please, Mom started. You're destroying your brother. I'm withdrawing my support. There's a difference. Over one dinner? One mistake. Over 28 years of mistakes. The dinner was just the first time other people witnessed it. Dad stepped forward. What do you want? Money? Recognition? Name it. I don't want anything from you. That's what you don't understand. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need David's acknowledgement. I'm done competing for space in a family that never had room for me. We love you, Mom said. Then you should have showed it. Not when you learned I have money. Oh, when I was just Sophie. When my achievements mattered just as much as David's. We didn't know how, Dad admitted. His voice cracked. David was easy to celebrate. Loud. Obvious. Successful in ways we understood. You were quieter. We didn't know how to see what you were building. Then you should have asked. They left. I went back to my algorithmic models. Week 10, David sent an email. Sophie, I've spent 2 months trying to understand how I missed this. How I spent 3 years running a company you funded while treating you like you needed my charity. Jennifer walked me through every board report you received. Every quarter where your investment kept us stable. Every decision we made because your capital gave us freedom to think long-term instead of desperately chasing revenue. You weren't just an investor. You were our foundation. And I offered you an entry-level job. I can't fix the past. I can barely explain it. Except to say that I got so comfortable seeing you as little sister, that I stopped seeing you as Sophie. As a person. As brilliant and successful and valuable in your own right. We found funding. A consortium is buying out your position at $38.7 million. The wire will go through on day 87. But I'm not asking you to stay. I'm asking if maybe someday we can try to be actual siblings. Not the golden child and the scapegoat. Just David and Sophie. I understand if that's not possible. I'm sorry. David. I read it 3 times. Didn't reply. Day 87, my attorney confirmed receipt. $38.7 million deposited into my investment account. I was no longer an investor in Social Metric. Just Sophie. With $127 million in assets and one less anchor. Jennifer sent one final email. Sophie. Transaction complete. You're officially out. For what it's worth, watching you execute this exit was the most strategic investor move I've ever witnessed. Perfectly legal, perfectly timed, perfectly devastating. David's different now. Humbler. More aware. The company will survive, but he knows the cost. If you ever want to invest in another tech startup, I'm starting my own company next year. I'd be honored to have you as a partner. Actually honored. Not because of your money. Because of you. Jennifer. I smiled. Replied, send me the deck when you're ready. I didn't plan to go to Christmas dinner. But David showed up at my condo on December 23rd. Please, he said. Just 2 hours. I know I don't deserve it. But I'm asking anyway. I almost said no.